Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Shaltazar Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Eisen, the channeler of Shaltazar, spiritual life coach, and an energy intuitive. This is episode 21, and I am pleased to have as my guest Catherine Allon from Toronto, an acquaintance for a number of years. Catherine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So happy to be here with you.
Excellent. Why don't you start by telling our listeners a little bit about you? I'm so fortunate that I have such a tremendous variety of guests on the show, and this helps the guests just get a sense of who you are. So maybe share with them a little bit of your personal journey, what you're currently doing, and then we will get into our discussion.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you all, in fact, Jeffrey and all. And my personal journey, it's been a while. It's been a long one, several decades. Anyway, so originally from Hungary, came through the revolution. That was a bit of a rocky road, but you can read about that if you like. It's in my first book. And now, in the last, since 1998, I've been very, very, very involved with connecting to the present moment, okay? I come out of a background with absolutely no religion and, have always had a very close connection to God, interestingly enough. Many people don't even say that name, but because I didn't grow up with any religion, I can say it. I can also say universe or universal intelligence or creator, source, whatever it is for you. That connection came to me very early. When I was in an orphanage, my parents put us in there, my brother and I, to learn English when we first came from Hungary. And so that is where I first connected to spirit. I first connected to my soul and to the essence of God within. And it was many years later, now in 1998, that I was awakened in Los Angeles. So that's another story.
Excellent. I just want to stop you there for a moment because you raised a very interesting point, and that is that you were not raised with formal religion, and I know a lot of people are, and it's hard for you to know this, but do you think it was easier to begin your spiritual awakening because you didn't have to get rid of the beliefs of a traditional religion?
Yes, that's very, very possible. It's interesting because I've had a chance to get a bit of everything and have been curious about all religions, but have never integrated any of them and have just felt very close to being a part of spirit and all that is, just naturally and particularly out in nature. But yeah, I'm sure that's a very large part of it, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because my personal journey, started when I was 50, and I was raised in the Jewish faith, and it tweaked something when you said it was really easy for you to say God. In the beginning of my journey, I had to let go of that word and use source and universe because God conjured up all of what I was taught in the religion. So for me, to a certain degree, and the way I went about it is, as I began to become spiritually awakened, I tried to go back to my religion and see if I could reconcile some of the beliefs that I newly acquired with my religion, and I was unsuccessful at doing that. But in that process, then I had to let go of using the word God because it just brought me back to the belief system that I couldn't agree with at this particular time. And so, although you may not have realized that was a bit of an advantage for you, maybe it was. And I encourage people that are going on their spiritual journey just to be aware that you can in some cases, reconcile parts of your religion with parts of your spirituality. I think God is there in most religions, and since we'll never really know what God is all about, then there's nothing wrong with having your own personal relationship with God.
Absolutely, and I think that applies to many, 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 many people, and why many people stay away from what we think of now as spirituality rather than religion, because religion somehow has failed many people in that it hasn't united them with others, and it's created a lot of wars around the world. And I think that we've kind of got our eyes, our head in the sand and our eyes closed to spirituality. And really, spirituality tells us that there's a God in every religion and there's God in every one of us. And my greatest message, if there's no other takeaway from today, is that there is no other. There's only you, and all is you, and all is one. And that is that full consciousness. That is that pure awareness. That is what we call spirituality. That is really the essence of ourselves and what we call within our heart rather than our ego self.
Right. That's a good point. And from my perspective, spirituality does not keep separate other religions and other beliefs that people have. It should not be, I believe, it should not be a competitiveness between my beliefs of a higher power and your beliefs of a higher power, or some organized religion's beliefs of a higher power. I don't believe that was the intention, that we should fight over who's right and who's wrong when it comes to that higher power. So let this be a call to all citizens of humanity, that regardless of your religious or spiritual beliefs, we have an opportunity to unite. We have an opportunity, as Catherine says, to become one, to enter that unity, and to stop letting the differences separate us, and instead allow the commonalities to unite us. Exactly.
That is such a large part of the way I live, and all you're saying about competitiveness and right and wrong and fighting for, who is right and who is wrong, and all of that is such a large part of my values, to bring openness, to bring some good energy to knowing that none of that is really truth. None of that really exists. It's only useful in separating us and dividing us, rather than in bringing us together in the love of our hearts and in the joy and the peace that we all are.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
in the present moment.
Yes, we're going to get to that present moment, because just before we started to record the podcast, you and I were talking about the present moment and the coincidence about that. But before we leave this religion, spirituality, I just want to say that if we can move to that oneness, we can take the energy of the fighting and use it for a greater purpose. Shaltazar makes it quite clear that living in human form is about the separation and the duality, but we do have the ability to master that duality and come together. And it's so interesting because, although Catherine and I are acquaintances, we haven't really talked that much about our spiritual beliefs, and you can certainly feel the energy that once we start talking about it, that we're coming together, because there's that sense of agreement, but more than just agreement, mutual respect for that sense of oneness. And so thanks for bringing that up. That's a very interesting thread of conversation. Let's move now to the present moment, and tell me a bit about the work you've been doing on it. I understand that's a good part of a new book that's coming out shortly.
Yes. Jeffrey, I go back to 1998 when I was first awakened in Los Angeles by Ramana, a teacher who awakens people and brings them into the present moment through a couple of weeks of training where we not only awaken ourselves in an individual session with him, and it's through a transmission that we are then able to pass on to others and have the script, the wherewithal, the ability to awaken others as well. In my training as a psychotherapist, I went from being a psychotherapist to being a spiritual psychotherapist, where I awaken people. I call it radical awakening. That's what Ramana calls it. It's radical in the sense that in an hour or two, sometimes longer, depending on your level of ego personality and your mind. We all have it. We all have this mind that has all these wonderful thoughts that aren't so wonderful sometimes and lead us astray. And we can unleash all of that. We can let that go, and we can feel ourselves. Really, it's about feeling. It's about feeling rather than thoughts. That's what we're moving into. That is the present moment. It's a feeling state. That's why it's so difficult to talk about it and to identify it and to say, well, this is this and this is that, because it has no words. It's an essence of being, and it's what every person who has a religion or a sense of spirituality feels within them. And, in non-duality, it is said that you don't have to go anywhere. There's nowhere to go. You have that inside you already. You have that within every cell. It's not necessarily just in the heart area. It's in every part of our bodies that we feel that full consciousness, that we feel that full awareness. So that when someone comes to a radical awakening session, that's what we bring the attention to. I facilitate that process. So through the transmission, you receive the tuning in.
Right.
It's a silence. It's wow, okay, that's it. I felt this before, and I know how to tune into it now.
Right. Yeah. It's certainly a feeling state, not a thinking state. Why don't you share with the listeners for a moment about that 1998 awakening? I'm curious, and because obviously that was a milestone in your life, and if you could maybe just describe what you went through or what it was like. I think in some cases, awakenings happen in very different ways for different people. Some of our listeners may be waiting for their awakening. Some may have had it and didn't realize they had it. But if you could share your personal experience with your awakening, I'd really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you, Jeffrey, for that. And I'd love to do that, because what can be done is for people to realize that they have already been awakened, or that they can step into that very easily. And what it was for me in 1998, I was definitely not a person who was walking every day in this kind of life. I was working for the Ministry of Health here in Toronto, and looking after 45 addictions treatment agencies all around Southern Ontario, and talking with CEOs and helping with programs and budgets and so on. So that wasn't my life. And when I went down to LA, all of that changed just by sitting with Ramana and responding to certain questions that he had that led me to this state of pure awareness. And, the questions had to do with a number of things. The most important is to bring an issue to it where you're feeling confused or need some clarity. And then what you do is talk about that issue. That's what I did. And I do that with all my clients. Talk about the issue to the point of really, really delayering it and peeling it all the way back to the core essence of that issue. What does the body, what does our spirit, what does our soul want for us? Really, that is why we have these issues, because our soul wants us to be whole and to feel that essence of being, to feel that unity with everything and everyone. And that is the core to which I was brought to. And recognizing that and staying in that pure awareness for a number of minutes before I was asked to open my eyes and come into the room. But of course, it lasted a lot longer. As everyone knows who's awakened, after a while, you do come back to reality because you have to go to work and you have to deal with your family and you have to deal with people who may not be awake yet or may not want to even recognize that. So, yeah, that's kind of how it happened. I walked out of that room with Ramana and into Los Angeles, the big city that it is. And it was just totally as though I was in heaven. I was in Eden. I was in a place of beauty and wonder, and the sky was so blue and the trees were so green and everything was so lush. Right. And it felt so wonderful.
Right. And so that awakening from my interpretation of it was an opportunity for you to be purely in the moment, and that coming to that present moment, that coming to what Shaltazar refers to as the now here, just allowed you to see everything in a different perspective. So many of us, and I know that happens to me, and I would assume it happens to a lot of our listeners, we're spending time either in the past or in the future. And that is really where the illusion is, because the past and the future exist only in the mind consciousness. And if you can truly get into the present moment, as you described, then you are in this place where you can see the blue sky, and you can even see the gray sky, and you can even see the inclement weather, and you can even see the storm with a greater depth, because you are seeing it from this moment. And I think this is really, really an important spiritual principle that can have a tremendous practical advantage to you in your life if you could allow yourself or practice going to the present moment more of the time. And it does take practice. Eckhart Tolle has brought this concept in one form to the world in his Power of Now. There are lots of other spiritual teachers that talk about it. Any hints, Catherine, to our listeners for ways to move more to the present moment?
Yes, everything you said is so valuable, Jeffrey, and so important. And, in terms of hints, going out into nature is essential for all of us. I mean, we city dwellers, those of us who are living in the city, who are listening, we don't get to go to the country as often as we'd like. But we're so lucky in places like Toronto, where there are conservation areas, where there are opportunities to walk down to the lake and Bruce Trail and all these other places where, for many people, just a stone's throw away, just a walk away or a short drive away. And then when you walk into nature and, whether you're touching a tree or going by and seeing the streams or looking at the blue sky or whatever it is for you, if you could just take a few moments to just immerse yourself in that. There's a higher vibration. There's a feeling of depth there. There's a feeling of, vibratory movement that you will immediately tap into if you allow yourself to focus. Just take a minute and focus in that. If you happen to be walking by yourself or even with another, you could take some walks. You could take some breaths, some long, deep breaths. That, by the way, long, deep breathing is a wonderful thing to do during the day. If you're confused or upset or just feeling really stressed and busy, just take yourself away and close your eyes for a couple of minutes and just breathe long and deep. Mm-hmm. And give yourself an image of some place of joy or peace or love, some wonderful conversation with your loved one, or just walking by the ocean, or walking on a mountaintop or somewhere in nature, and allow yourself to just breathe into that image for a couple of minutes. And when you open your eyes, you'll feel like you're in the present moment. You'll feel like you're a little bit at a distance from where you were before you closed your eyes.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. For the listeners that are following the podcast, I believe it was episode 18, Jonathan Morgan was on, and the essence of his spiritual practice was nature. And for any of you that haven't listened to that episode, I highly encourage you to do so, because he learned his sense of connection, his spirituality through nature. Another thing I want to comment on is, as you were talking about the breath and focusing on one particular pleasant experience, it reminds me a lot of the Buddhist practices of the breath and the anchor and coming back to the present moment. Most of the Buddhist philosophy, or a lot of the Buddhist philosophy and practices, are based on coming to that present moment and watching as things arise and things fall away. So, and I would certainly concur with you that nature is a great place to practice. And I've thought about that many times. And what's come to me is that in nature, you do not have the distraction of other human beings. You can have a relationship in nature, and nature doesn't talk back to you, and nature doesn't give you a hard time, and nature doesn't argue with you. So it's a great opportunity, that communing, that getting at one with nature is a real easy place to start, because it's inanimate perspective. It's just there. It's there, willing to share in a sense of openness, and to get to that with another human being takes a lot of practice.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any other, thanks so much for all of the great practical advice you've been giving so far. Anything else in terms of the present moment, or any other spiritual practices that can help us in our practical life? Obviously, that awakening was your beginning, but then you've had since 1998 to practice integrating that into your life.
Yes, there are many other modalities, many other ways. And one of the easiest is to focus on your body. So in other words, it's right there, available to you. As soon as your mind is going off on a tangent from where you'd like it to be, and you're just overanalyzing, and thoughts are coming in that you don't like, and you're in a state of fear or anxiety or whatever it is for you, you're feeling like you've been taken back to the past somewhere where you don't want to be, or into the future where you really hope things will never happen. So any of those situations, just allow yourself to take some breaths and immediately focus on the inside of your body. So focus on your fingertips, focus on your feet, focus on your heart, focus on your throat area, your gut area, any part of the body, wherever you go first. So you're breathing long and deep, and you're focusing in on your body. Now, as soon as you focus in on the body rather than on a thought, you're immediately in the present moment. Mm-hmm. That'll take you there immediately. Mm-hmm. Some other ways are all the many myriads of things, the hobbies, the beloved gifts that people have, the talents people have, like writing and painting and dancing and singing and poetry writing, all the many, many ways of talents and abilities that Creator has given us to create that beauty and wonder that it knows to create. And so using that, just being in front of a canvas or whatever, in front of a pad and writing, or in front of your computer and writing there, whatever you may enjoy doing, immediately you open yourself to your soul self, your spirit self. Your mm-hmm. spirit will come through as soon as you take a task that you love to do, you're passionate about, and it has joy, it has beauty, or whatever it is for you. It'll come through for you, and you will feel your sense of oneness with the universe just through doing that. You will be in the present moment.
Yes, the creatives have learned that, I know, many times, because in order to create the sculpture, the painting, the song, you need to be in the present moment. You will not be creating that lovely creative piece by thinking about the past or in the future. You have to do it in the moment. And so that's great advice to practice staying in the present moment, do something creative, and focus on it. I just want to add,
exactly.
This concept is beyond spirituality. There is a big movement of mindfulness that even comes from the science and medical field. There is a lot of talk these days about mindfulness, Jon Kabat-Zinn and the mindfulness movement. And you don't necessarily have to have deep spiritual beliefs to practice this present moment awareness, this mindfulness. And so
exactly.
I think that's important to realize that it will accomplish the same thing whether your present moment awareness is spiritually based or scientifically and medically based from a mindfulness practice. You get the same result, which is that full experience of all of you, that oneness. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree, Jeffrey, and I think you read my mind, because that was one of my things that I wanted to mention for sure. And I'm quite ecstatic about the fact that the whole medical profession has embraced mindfulness, and the work of Jon Kabat-Zinn and others who followed him. Here in Canada, mindfulness groups are covered by the government, mm-hmm. so that it's not only embraced, it's accepted and paid for, so that you can go to your doctor, and if you find a mindfulness group, they will pay for it. Mm-hmm. Particularly if it's supervised by a physician. Here in the Beaches area in Toronto, there is a physician who has a mindfulness group, and so if you can find one of those. And that's a wonderful way to reach the present moment. I don't know if you know Sounds True. That is another promoter of all of these spiritual events and individuals, and John Kabat-Zinn has a broadcast through them, very inexpensive, and that's certainly available to many. So yeah, I totally agree with that, Jeffrey.
Yeah. Yeah, I had the pleasure a while ago of seeing John Kabat-Zinn at the Hot Docs Theater here in Toronto.
Nice.
And I will tell you that, regardless of his approach to mindfulness, I'm an energy intuitive and I'm energetically sensitive. You could feel the love and compassion and empathy just oozing out of that guy because he has spent so much time in the present moment. So I will tell you that there are great benefits for you, your loved ones, and everybody in your life if you begin your practice of staying more in the present moment. It does take practice, it does take effort, but I'm sure you would agree, Catherine, it's worth it.
Yes, and recently, people who have been awakened many times will say, "Oh, well, yeah, I was awakened, but I'm having difficulty getting back there." And Dr. Sue Mortar, who does energy codes, has various techniques of anchoring that awakening, that our ability to stay in the present moment. And that is such a useful process. So if people are interested in doing that, then I would certainly recommend her as one of the enlightened people who's been able to help people anchor their present moment awakening.
It's really an amazing time to be alive because there is so much out there. There are so many amazing teachers, so many practices, so many techniques, whether you are into sound healing or the mindfulness and on and on and on. I can't even begin to explain some of the stuff that's out there that can help us in the present moment. There's really a movement towards it. Again, I reiterate, whether you are spiritual or not, I certainly prefer the spiritual present moment awareness, but there's lots of help out there. There's lots of modalities. The internet is a great place to start. There's so many people that are teaching us this stuff, and find somebody that resonates with you, because then it will be easier to learn. It's really, really important. And I think it is a really, and I'm so thrilled that we got an opportunity to talk about this. Again, before the podcast started, I was sharing with you how just this morning I channeled a message from Shaltazar, and I haven't quite deciphered it yet because it's rather esoteric and very mystical, because they are explaining that in the higher realms, everything is in the eternal now, and that our limitations of the fourth dimension, where we have the linearity and time, is what really prevents us from manifesting more instantaneously. So, Catherine, it has been certainly a pleasure. I can't believe how quickly the time has gone by. Thank you so much for chatting with me about this. Why don't you share a bit with the listeners what you have going on? You mentioned your second book. Please tell the listeners a bit more about that, and any self-promotion you feel comfortable sharing.
Yes, thank you, Jeffrey. It has really gone by quickly. I can't believe it either. So I'm just finishing editing my next book. I have a book called Success Starts Today with Jack Canfield and Other Professionals. And I'm just about to publish, with the help of Balboa Press, of course, Universal Principles for Creative Living is the working title, but I'm thinking of something like Embodying the Present Moment, perhaps, as a title. I haven't quite, or we haven't quite decided. So it's definitely moving towards a direction of me working with people around the present moment and writing about that and talking about that and facilitating that opportunity. I also teach Kundalini yoga. And I have a wonderful family, 6 grandchildren.
Wow,
so,
lucky you.
Loving life and enjoying life.
Right. So we can have it both, eh? We can have that awakening, and we can also have our human existence. Catherine's website and her email address will be in the description of the podcast. I encourage you to get in touch with her, you could be on that list to get that new book. It's certainly been a pleasure chatting with you, and I thank you so much for being on the podcast with me. Once again, my name is Jeffrey Eisen. I am a spiritual life coach, channeler of Shaltazar, and an energy intuitive. If you are at all interested in being a guest on my show, we have lots of fun, and it's really a great opportunity to share your beliefs, your spiritual beliefs, and how you can help them help others apply these spiritual beliefs into your everyday life. So if you are interested, please connect with me at jeffreyeisen.com. It is certainly a pleasure and a treat to do this podcast. I love it. This is episode number 21, I believe, and hopefully lots more coming. Tune in again next time. Thank you, Catherine, for joining us.
Thank you so very much, Jeffrey. I really, really appreciate it. And look forward to speaking with you again. People are interested. It's energyawakening.com. And I look forward to seeing you if you're interested in the radical awakening process. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Signing off from the Shaltazar Podcast, Jeffrey Eisen. Thanks. And until next time, love and light to you all.
Love and light to you. Thank you.